Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Conversations with Kevin. And I have a special guest with us today, my friend Kristin Link, who lives in Alaska. I want to also thank NKU and the School of the Arts for allowing me to have these conversations for the community, for our artists, and for our students and the greater art world. Welcome, Kristen. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was gonna say good afternoon, but it's morning where you are. Could you tell us a little bit about where you live?
Yeah, I live in McCarthy, which is how I met Kevin because he did an artist residency out here. But right now I'm in my cabin, which is a little off the grid cabin up in my loft, which is also like my kind of mobile studio space. And we're it's kind of hard to describe where we are. A lot of people, even people who live in Alaska, don't know where McCarthy is. It's a really small town, but it's like an 8 hour drive from Anchorage. So a lot of people when they get to Alaska end up in Anchorage. And then you drive like 6 hours on paved roads and then 60 miles down a dirt road where it dead ends. You walk across a river. Then to get to my house, you have to travel another hour actually, like by off-road vehicle. But we're surrounded by mountains and glaciers and the Wrangell St. Elias National Park over by the Yukon border. So pretty close to Canada.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And I remember when you picked me up when I was artist in residence in Anchorage, and you had actually had to camp the night before from McCarthy to come and get me and my wife Tammy. And then lo and behold, I was like, okay, it'll be a short car ride to get to the artist residency. And as you explained, it it took a long time. So I'm going to ask you a question that I ask everybody, and I'm also going to add another question to that. How did you get interested in art, and how did you get interested in living in Alaska off the grid?
Yeah. They're both a little bit related, but I got interested in art because it's just something I was always doing and I never stopped. So I think that was
Hmm.
like a key thing is just like not stopping it. But I was born in Belgium, which is a really rainy place. And I do think that I lived there until I was 7. My sister and I had like this table set up in our house. We just would draw and make art. My mom would like give us art supplies, nothing fancy necessarily, but we just would have all that time to explore. And we'd go outside in the rain too. But I think living in a rainy place and having like access to materials to draw with helped me know that I liked doing that. And then both of my grandmothers spent a lot of time making stuff with us. My parents weren't like were very supportive of my siblings and I pursuing arts, but they weren't artists themselves. So my grandmothers did a lot of making things with us, from like cooking and sewing. And then my mom's mom, Ellen, we called her more Ellen because she's Norwegian, uh, was a watercolor painter, and she used to do a lot of art with us and take us up to her studio and taught us to watercolor paint like since we were really little. And she also lived in an off-the-grid cabin in Maine, and I thought that was so cool. So that was a huge inspiration for my lifestyle. I didn't like necessarily like want to grow up and be her per se, but just knowing that that kind of life existed helped me kind of find it and know that it was something that I liked.
Mhm. Wow, that's great. And then you went to college at Middlebury College and graduated with a conservation biology degree, and then you went on eventually to get a certificate from California State University in Monterey Bay in scientific illustration. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually did a double major. So like kind of going back to the like I never stopped doing art. It's just something that I always enjoyed and definitely wanted to pursue um living abroad and like growing up in Europe, a bit of my understanding that you have to like specialize in subject areas. And one thing that I appreciated about American education and liberal arts education in particular was having that multidisciplinary approach. And I think there's other ways of doing that, but this is like kind of a very standard way of doing it. So something that I was
Hmm.
really interested in was being able to study science because I thought that would be a better job. Turns out being an artist is a great job, I think. But being able to study science and then also continuing to study and do art. So yeah, doing that double major and then kind of like going through that process. Also, I realized as I was working on like deciding to do a senior thesis, I decided to do that in art. So that was kind of a step in the direction of like, this is how I want to spend my time. Um, that was it's still like my favorite thing is creating things. And I love being outside and collaborating with science, which is why I pursued science illustration eventually as
Yeah.
well. But part of that story is that as I was working on my thesis in art, because I decided I wanted to do a studio art thesis, I originally was doing these like abstract landscape paintings, because I really liked oil painting when I was younger, because it's really cool. But I wasn't really happy with where it was going, and I kept kind of like running into these like dead ends. We'd have studio visits with our professors, and they'd come in, they're like, look at this like cool pen and ink drawing that you've done. And this was like the second time in my life that someone had been like looking through my portfolio and said, you know, these drawings are pretty good. Maybe you should look into illustration or like pursuing more drawing. Um, so that was kind of like just not like necessarily you should do this thing, but this is something that's working. Maybe think about doing that a little bit more. And then at the same time, I had been taking all of these natural history classes and science classes where we had to memorize um like what different birds were or different invertebrates were. So I had to like walk into a lab and look at a jar of something and say that's a an annelid
Yeah.
or what family it's in. So I was spending all this time looking at natural history specimens to identify them, and I started drawing that stuff, and that's kind of what led me to think like, oh, this science illustration thing, drawing from nature, making detailed drawings is something that I actually like, but didn't really click until then.
Mhm. And you really start to know something in a really genuine and specific way when you draw from it, as opposed to just like memorizing it. And you've just seen so many things. I've seen some of your sketches, and so I think you have a really intimate understanding of the natural world through your observational drawing and sketching, and I think that that's just a beautiful thing, and I thank you for sharing that with the world. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, my
Um,
pleasure.
yeah, and would you agree that when you draw something, you understand it in a different way?
For sure. For me, I do use it like sketching and drawing as a tool and teach it as a tool for, I mean, it's a wonderful tool as an artist, but also as like a naturalist or scientist. Kind of like going back to the multidisciplinary thing. I teach in some programs where my students like don't necessarily aspire to be artists, but they do want to be out in the environment and learn to identify things or do a better job kind of like noticing patterns that are going on and drawing a landscape and looking at like what different out here we have a lot of glaciers, so you can like if you're sketching like the shape of the landscape you can kind of then really think on a different level of like, oh, what happened here, like this is a moraine where this glacier used to be, like a pile of rocks that used to be at the edge of the ice and then it melted back. Now you can't see that, but you can still see the pile of rocks, and drawing it really helps you pay attention to it in a different way. And it also for me like helps me realize what I don't know, because sometimes I'll draw like what I think I see or think I understand about a flower, and then as I'm working through it, I'm like, oh, I actually didn't look at what was going on. Like for botany, it's really important to know, like what the petals are doing and what the sepals are doing, how they're connected to the stem, and how many there are. And
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
drawing's a really great way to separate those out and kind of systematically look through them.
Hmm. And so you were kind of straddling the line for a while between being a painter and a naturalist and a illustrator. Could you tell us some of your artistic heroes or just heroes in general, some people that you really some people that inspire you?
Yeah. I guess I'll say that like I still kind of work in a couple different fields. So I work as a science illustrator, but also do fine artwork. And I do a lot of teaching, and a lot of like field sketching that sort of ties everything together. So some of my field sketching heroes, who are both like currently alive and practicing, are John Muir Laws, who sort of like made nature journaling a thing. We went to the same program in science illustration, so I think we come from like a similar tradition of looking at and studying and doing observational drawing. Um, but especially his approach, which like takes a lot of the emphasis off of the art and puts it onto curiosity, asking questions, making observations, is really cool and really rich. And um, his thing, I think you're going to ask me about quotes, but
Yeah, I always do. But if you have the quote now or later, that's
I can do
fine.
it
Yeah.
now.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, because it ties into him and then another person who's like one of my art heroes.
Hmm. Yeah.
But his quote is that love is sustained, compassionate attention. And so his work a lot about like that time spent with the subject matter, which is a really big thread for me and like important for like kind of I think I said like the reason why I became an artist was because I just enjoyed the process. So for me, like the process is really important. And then Wendy McNaughton is another artist who's really inspirational to me in the way that she teaches and shares sketching and art practice with people. As an illustrator and someone who kind of like, I think walks the line between art and illustration and does like illustrated journalism, I think is really cool. That she like brings people into a place through her sketches. And a lot of times they are like very sketchy feeling, like you feel like she was there drawing it, which um is cool. And she does a lot of like sketching teaching and drawing practice teaching, but comes at it more from the perspective of like she used to work as a social worker and kind of from more of like a social emotional perspective, which I think is a really good balance to like nature can do that for us, but it's also really cool to think about it as like a human community as well. And she
Mhm.
basically says the same thing, which is that drawing is looking and looking is love. So it's kind of
Yeah.
about that like attention and love and just spending time. And one of the exercises that she's taught and like done at art museums is having two people who like don't know each other, but you do a contour drawing of each other's faces. And through that experience, which I found as an artist too, like you kind of fall in love with, like, even though maybe you think like, oh, this person, like, I don't know them, I have no relationship with them or understanding of them, but when you sit down and draw, you kind of build that connection.
Yeah. One of my drawing teachers always said that drawing was touching from afar. And so that,
Ooh.
yeah, so that's kind of like all of a sudden you have this connection with someone who you might not know, but in a way, when you're drawing, you're kind of touching their face in a really intimate way through with your eyes. And I want to know, are some of those quotes in your new book?
They are. I put them in
Yeah.
my book's introduction, so that's where I got them from. I just
Yes.
wrote
Uh,
this book. Ah,
Yeah,
wrote and
I
drew.
want, yeah, discover the art of field sketching. I really want people to know about this book. And could you tell us a little bit about the creation of it and how long it took and the intense process that like making a book uh, takes?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool process to go through. So I have been, since I did my degree in science illustration, I've been teaching field sketching, mostly in Alaska. And I love it because it combines like being in place, being in nature, and I think people can use it whether they're scientists or artists or whatever. I think it's such an amazing tool, as I think I've said.
Hmm.
And I had been thinking like, oh, it'd be cool to write a book about this. I guess earlier on in my life, people had asked me if that's something I would do. And I was like, I don't know, I'm not really ready. But eventually I felt ready. Like
Hmm.
I had enough things gathered that were what I like to teach and what I want to share, that I thought it would be cool to put it down in one resource. And then maybe as an act of serendipity, one of my students in one of my workshops, like my field sketching workshop, wrote about that workshop for the New York Times travel section. This was like a while ago. And a editor from Timber Press, which is a small publisher who ended up publishing my book. They're based in Portland, Oregon. Read it and reached out to me, and he was like, "Are you interested in writing a book? What do you want to write a book about?" And so that was kind of like the start of the conversation.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of from there put together a proposal of like, yeah, I want to teach a book about or write a book about field sketching, kind of like what I teach in my workshop, but a little bit more extended. I want it to come. There's so many people who are doing amazing work with field sketching, and like I could have easily written a book that was like sharing all of their ideas, but I wanted to have a clear perspective of like what works for me and also connect it to the place where I live. So there's a lot of like pictures and experience of sketching in Alaska, all of the projects, because its heart is as an instructional book. So it has like 30 step-by-step projects in it. Um, and I tried to build them like sequentially. So like how I'd do in a workshop. So starting with line drawing and then adding shading, adding pen, then working with watercolor, and kind of like building in complexity from like starting with a leaf or a flower, to more of a three-dimensional subject to more of a complicated, like a whole flower with leaves and different things going on, to landscapes, to animals, etc. So kind of like all the different things that maybe you'd want to sketch if you lived in Alaska. Not everything, because you can't do everything, but a variety of
Yeah.
stuff.
You sent me the digital copy and I was looking through it and I just love how it's laid out with a quote for each chapter. I'm a big quote fanatic. I love starting every class period with a quote. So it's like you had me with that first page and then like turning through the pages and seeing each lesson or each project. I thought it's really well laid out and I can't wait to get a copy of it. So I'm gonna order it, and I think everybody that's watching this should do the same because it's a really great way to experience the world. And whether or not you're in Alaska or in northern Kentucky, you can go to a park and find different specimens and draw some of those plants or leaves and you might even run across a skull or two. We don't have as many skulls down here as you do in your book, but I was like, ooh, another skull drawing. Ooh, another skull drawing.
They're such great subjects.
They are, yeah. So I thought the book is great, and I can't wait to get a copy of it. And I want to congratulate you on that. I think that that's a great accomplishment. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really fun to get to share it with the world. I think you asked me a little bit about my process. Like I worked on it for a little over a year after I got the contract to write it. And then the publisher and I kind of went back and forth and did the whole like editing, design, a lot of things that I don't even know what they're like. I know they were working on stuff behind the scenes, but I wasn't as involved with like some of the steps for like 2 other years. So it's
Uh,
yeah, it takes a
wow.
few years to have a book come out into the world.
Yeah, that's
It's
great.
cool.
Yeah. And I guess could you describe the environments that you like to work in? Do you like to work in your cabin? Do you obviously doing field sketching, you like to be out and about? Can you talk about your different studio environments, whether it's at home or out in doing plein air and field sketching?
Yeah. I do love working outside and from life. And that is a big part of my work is like getting to do that, especially in the summers. Um, it's a lot harder to sketch outside in the winter. It's something that I do, but it's just I like to have as much of the summer as possible to be outside, um, camping and hiking. I teach some field courses, which is a really great way for me to be kind of like doing art with other people and being outside. And for that, I I think doing field sketching, and especially working with like pen, pencil, watercolor, they tend to be a little bit quicker than if you're doing like a whole oil painting or painting in plein air. Although I know some people can work like quite quickly doing that, but my process is usually like in one setting. Though I do find it very freeing to like maybe I was in a place and then it started raining, so I decided I wasn't gonna like keep trying to watercolor through that because watercoloring in the rain doesn't work so well.
Neither
Um,
does oil painting when it's storming.
yeah,
It
right.
starts to look like bad watercolor.
Yeah. So I might like be back the next year and I'll sometimes like open that page again and start sketching from that perspective of like, I mean, sometimes like this is what I remember, but also just knowing that there's a year gap in that sketch, it's kind of a cool thing. It's like, why not do that?
Mhm. Wow.
Revisiting sketches like at different times. Or even like starting to sketch like a mountain scene at night and then coming back in the morning and finishing it. That can be a cool thing to do as well. Um, but yeah, in general, like working kind of quickly doing studies. And then it's a lot harder to sketch in the winter, like I said. So I do also like to have that kind of like relaxed time in a studio space with a like warm, comfortable place to sit and draw. I like to do like not very big, but bigger than my sketchbook, like this big-ish. You can
Mhm.
see
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always reversed.
Kind of like meditative drawings. Um, I do a lot of illustration work as well, so I'm not afraid to like bring my artwork into the computer. When I work on the computer, I usually like to have some part of it that's like handmade. A lot of times I'll draw something and then scan it in and color it in on the computer if I'm doing a digital project. But yeah, a lot of times I'll work up here in this space, which is in our cabin loft. We live in like a one-room cabin. So it's pretty small, but it's good working on small scale projects. And then I have a yurt that I can also use if I have like a bigger project to work on that I need to spread out more. But
The Yurt Studio. I
a
just
yurt
wanted to say that.
studio. And
That's
it's
cool.
pretty sweet, but it has its own wood stove, so I have to like start a fire over there. And it's a little bit of a barrier to starting
Mhm.
work,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But right now, like, yeah, it's probably warm enough in there. So
Mhm.
it's more of a summer season studio or when I
Mhm.
really just need that space.
In your book, you talk a little bit about trying to do a quick sketch during a fire.
Hmm.
And could you talk about some of your maybe more harrowing experiences when you've been out? I'm sure you've encountered all sorts of wildlife as well, or in terms of, I know you said you don't really like the field sketch in the winter, but I'm sure that you've handled some pretty extreme weather conditions. So if you could share with us a few of those stories, that would be great.
Yeah, I don't have any like super. I feel like I should have like I was sketching and then a bear came. I don't have that story, but you do have cool encounters with wildlife or just like sitting still in a landscape. I find that you definitely have to pay attention to what's going on around you. It's a little because you can get so quiet. I do like sketching outside in the winter a bit. I just have adapted the process to be like even quicker and more simple. So a lot of times just doing a quick like a pencil sketch. Because watercolors freeze. You can try and paint with alcohol, but it just behaves differently, and I don't like that. But using like colored pencils or pencils can work. And making like simple gesture studies and line studies works. The fire example is cool because I was teaching a class and we were looking at forest fire ecology um, north of Fairbanks on the Upper Chena River. And there was an active forest fire happening, like not very close to us, but close enough that we were getting quite a bit of smoke. And we had like the instructors and I had a conversation. We sat down, we're like, is this bad? Are we doing okay? We're like, I think we're still okay. We can stay out here. Like the smoke levels are okay. So I sat down, I taught a landscape sketching class of like looking at perspective, and it was kind of cool because there was already like a little bit of a smoky landscape, but then the landscape just like totally shifted, like the wind shifted and the smoke started coming towards us. So we were all sitting there like looking at the landscape as like the sky went like orange and then like black. And then there were like the spruce needles, the burned up spruce needles,
Oh,
ash was falling on us and like falling on everyone's paintings while we were working. So it was very dramatic. And
oh,
like during that whole process, we just kind of like started laughing, like, oh my goodness, we are definitely gonna leave and head somewhere with like better air quality. We ended up going to just someone's house that had like an air purifier and we can go inside and close the windows and just have some better air to
yeah.
breathe. But um I have had like some experiences in Alaska. I think it's such a dynamic landscape. I don't know, this can happen anywhere, like in northern Kentucky as well, but sometimes with like some of the glaciers and events out here, it just like changes really fast. And um, every summer here, like in McCarthy, we have like a Yokelhop, which is like a outburst glacial flood where there's a lake that gets formed that's dammed by the glacier ice, and then in usually early July, it breaks and all that water drains. So one time we were out in the backcountry, we got to see that, like the end of, or the part of the lake draining, which was like a really cool, very dynamic process.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And it's like when you're talking about the forest fire, I was thinking, oh, you're teaching atmospheric perspective, but to one up Leonardo da Vinci, it's like this is fire perspective.
But watch
Of
the
course.
atmosphere change.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah.
I know. It
Um,
was unexpected, but kind of cool.
mhm.
And cool to
And
like, we knew we had to leave, but we're also like, okay, we have to leave, but we don't have to leave like this. It's not like the fire's going to come here and it's just like the air quality is really bad. So we could sit still for a few minutes and just kind of observe that and be still with the change, which I think is one thing that's like really nice about sketching in these crazy dynamic places, as long as it's safe.
Mhm. Well, I want to see some crazy dynamic work. So I'm going to share some of your work, and if you could talk about it, that would be great. So let's see. Can you see the image right now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk about this piece, how big it is, and how long it took?
Yeah, this is something that I did actually this past fall. And there's like a kind of like a few that are similar to this, but it's about glacier succession. So like the environment that exists at the edge of the glacier. Um, and I made it for actually kind of a unique commission. I did it for the Alaska State Council on the Arts and the Humanities Forum. They give awards every year to people and they hire an artist to make the awards. So this is made of 9 8 by 10 inch panels, and each of one of them like got to be broken down into its own award. But I wanted to create. I got this idea from another artist who did it another year, but kind of like that these all work together to create an image, which is why it's kind of like a grid because they're like all those little panels. So it was
Mhm.
really fun and a challenge to think of like how to build this thing where like each one could work on its own, but that they also work together to tell a story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna share a few more of your things and um, let's see. You were talking about glaciers. Up where you live in McCarthy, there's the Root Glacier, right? Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure you've drawn that probably a few times, right? And I know that this isn't the Root Glacier, but could you talk to?
It's close to it though. It
Okay,
is the Kennecott Glacier, which is like the other
yeah.
glacier that comes into the Root Glacier.
Okay. Can you talk about like drawing glaciers and how big they are? Because a lot of people haven't had experiences with glaciers.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. So this is on the Kennecott Glacier and it's drawn kind of it's based on like some sketches I did, but I drew I got to this place after spending like hiking for at least a whole day across the glacier. Not because it's like super far necessarily. It is a couple miles across, so quite big and then like really, really long. So glaciers form up in the mountains where it's like really tall mountains over 10,000 feet, I'd say, where the snow lasts all summer and all that snow builds up and eventually gets compressed and turns into ice. And when there's enough of it, it starts flowing downhill. That's like what a glacier is when there's enough snow that it starts flowing. And then they flow down into the valleys, like close to where I live, and depend on like it varies how long they are, but they start melting, so you get down to like this that compressed blue ice, and they start cracking as they travel around corners. Those are called crevasses. Um, but yeah, they'll go like miles and miles up into the mountains, and then they're like several miles across, although they also vary in size. But the ones out here are kind of like several miles across, and you can hike across them, but it takes a long time because there's lots of piles of rocks that get carried by the ice. Those are called moraines. So going over like rock covered ice is challenging, and the ice is melting and cracking. So you have to navigate those crevasses and the streams. Um, and this is kind of thinking about spending all that time on that ice, how it flows. They really become like, I don't know, they feel like very alive when you spend time with them because they're moving and they're making noises and like breathing next to you, and they like drain water, fill up with water, and it drains. So it was kind of, I've been like that last piece thinking about a little bit more about like as glaciers melt and leave. Um, it's pretty easy to like feel very sad about that, especially when you like spend time with them and get to know them out here. So I've been intentionally doing some work about kind of like the edges of glaciers and the new environments that are left when after glaciers leave, and just kind of like meditating on those and thinking about those as like that's what's coming next. And they have their own kind of like beauty, and they're really interesting kind of crazy places. A lot of times they're pretty hard to travel through as well because they have a lot of like weird frozen melted thawed ground that can be like quicksand and mud.
Hmm.
But yeah, this is kind of like thinking about those glacier edges and spending time on the upper Kennecott.
Yeah. I like how the things that you were saying about glaciers, I feel that you've captured its liveliness. It looks like it's creeping towards us, but at the same time, it's probably also melting due to climate change. And the it it has a very formidable look about it because I know when we were out there, um, like, oh, you can actually hike on a glacier, and maybe since you're in Alaska, like that's like duh, yeah, you can. But like it was a scary experience for us in terms of like worried about like all of the different uh possibilities of like death in terms of
Hmm.
the crevasses and the sinkholes and all of that stuff. And I bet you have to be cautious when you're going out to do your sketches.
Yeah, I think like traveling on a glacier that's ice, so if it's not covered with snow, then you can kind of see what the hazards are, which is nice. And there are plenty of hazards like steep edges and holes that disappear into nowhere. Like no one actually knows like their drainage is in the glacier, but
Yeah.
people don't know exactly like where they go or how they're connected. And you would probably die if you fell in there. But you know it's there, so you can kind of like it's really hard not to want to get close and look down it. And sometimes you can find ones that are like small enough that you can really peer over and look into. But it's pretty also manageable to say like, okay, this is a safe place to be. This is a place to be that you're like paying attention. And then like this is a place where the ice doesn't look as stable and it's close to something that could fail or lead to like a not a good fall.
Hmm.
If you're on a snow-covered glacier, that's a little bit more complicated because the snow's covering all those hazards. So a lot of times then you'll be like roped up, which is what or why people rope up or like travel on a rope team. So then like if one person falls, the other person would hopefully catch them, like
Hmm.
fell into an unknown hole. Um, but yeah, down like near McCarthy, most of the glaciers that we get to go on are not covered in snow, at least in the summer.
Hmm. I'm gonna pull up another one, but since you were talking about all of this trekking on glaciers and stuff, I want people to know that you've hiked Denali. Could you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. It didn't involve a lot of art, but I guess like all those experiences kind of add up into who we are as people and as artists. Um, the first winter when I moved to Alaska, I worked with a like with sled with sled dogs there, like in not there, in Willow, which looks at Denali. And I'd been interested in mountaineering at that point in my life, um, and wanted to get more experience. So signed up to climb Denali with a group with the Alaska Mountaineering School. And after spending like all winter in Alaska, which I think was really good because we were like working outside all the time, and my body was like used to operating outside in the cold. Because climbing Denali up like the West Buttress route, which is kind of the more straightforward standard routes. It's kind of a slog. Like we spent like about 3 weeks out there, which is a good amount of time, I think, to spend in the backcountry, but also a long time. Um, and you're living in the snow, dealing with wind and storms, camping in the snow. So it was really helpful to like have that winter experience. We went in late April, early May. So like around this time of year, I always think of as like kind of when we got finished with it. But it was really cool, just like spending that amount of time in an environment that's not like super friendly to people, maybe. And then we were traveling on snow-covered glacier, so we were roped up. So you're always traveling like on a rope team, pretty much, so that you don't like if someone falls in a crevasse or a moulin or some kind of hole under the snow that you don't know is there, you are protected. Which is just like a really interesting way to travel for that long because you're always walking at someone else's speed. Um, but yeah, just beautiful spending that amount of time like up in the high mountains. I think some of the coolest experiences were like getting up high and like walking along the summit ridges and seeing the other side. Like I love connecting dots
Oh,
across the landscape and seeing into Western Alaska was just like really, really cool. Um,
wow,
Yeah,
that's
and then
great.
coming back down into spring after spending all winter in Alaska, we're having like a really slow start to spring right now, but it's an amazing time of year when life just like goes crazy and like everything, like the birds come back and the leaves come out and the flowers come out. It's kind of an explosion because we have such a short summer here.
Mhm. Could you tell us a little bit about the piece that I just pulled up?
Yeah, so kind of part of my glacier series has been making these drawings of the glacier surface, and then creating cyanotypes from them. So this one I made kind of before I was working on like the more like glacier edges focused ones that we just saw. But these were really like kind of my love letters to glaciers and spending time on glaciers. And also kind of with the cyanotype thinking about memory, about changing places, and a little bit like artwork to hold the sadness of these things changing and being lost. So I like the process of making like very detailed meditative drawings, like making all the little line marks and that you can kind of see that in the work. But then taking that and making a print from it using the sun, um, it creates kind of this like other layer, other factor. Like sometimes some of the lines end up being a little bit blurry, not coming through completely clear, where like the paper is separated from the paper or the I was drawing on mylar, so like the transparent paper, mylar vellum separated from the watercolor paper that I was printing on. Um, so that was kind of like a nice way to convey that. And I think I also made like, I was working on them a lot during 2020 and throughout the pandemic. So it was sort of, I mean, it's still very much a crazy time in our world and in our country, but it was nice to have this like work that had space for kind of like sadness and change in it during that period of time and kind of being able to share that and have a community around it too by sharing it.
It's really beautiful. And what I respond to is I don't know if it's because it's a cyanotype, but to me, I look at it and I see, I almost don't see this from your point of view as the artist. I almost feel like it's the glacier and
Mm,
the mountains surrounding it. It's like their interpretation. So there is a sadness there, and it's also almost like I don't understand it in terms of I think of myself as a human, and this is a glacier and just the monumental scale of these things and the time that a glacier lives compared to the time that I live. And I look at this and I feel that it's like the glacier telling me as a human, you know nothing. Like it's or like it's a different language of understanding that we in our long lives of maybe 90 to 100 years if we're lucky have really no understanding of the length and life of a glacier. Um, so that's
yeah.
yeah.
I agree, and I think that's like one of the special things about like taking time, like that kind of like sustained attention with subjects that are so much older than us, is just sort of like spending time meditating on that time scale, and it does make you feel so small and like less significant, which is really nice sometimes too.
I totally agree. And then it can make you feel small. And I think we need to feel small more often. And I think that it's a really humbling experience. And then I've kind of blown this one up. This is thinking small in a way, like compared to a glacier. Could you talk about this sketch from your field sketch book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that like something that I seem to keep doing as an artist is like switching scale. So sometimes like even through layering, although I don't know if any of these examples show that, but I do like to switch from like zooming out and thinking about the whole landscape and then like zooming in. And a lot of times those patterns, you'll see them like if you think about like dendritic patterns or like watersheds of this like branching form or like this if you think about like the way our veins look, like that pattern's repeated so often in nature at different scales, and I think that's like really cool. I'm always sort of drawn by that thread of like how things are connected and related, and like you can look at this small thing and it looks similar, has ties to something that's really big. um and I do, speaking of looking at small things, like love doing these like kind of botany sketches and looking inside of flowers. I'm always fascinated by kind of like form and function, why flowers are structured the way they are, and kind of how they look. So a lot of this is drawing to like study botany and learn what these different names are, and what the plants are, what families they are. And I've learned a lot about like botany and plants from drawing, which has been really, really cool. It's been a great tool for learning that. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of what's going on here.
Yeah, cool. And then let's see. All of a sudden I'm trying to oh there we go. I was trying to stop sharing. Can you besides your love of the outdoors and also sketching, what other hobbies or loves and passions do you have?
Yeah. I do think that like just our lives are sort of like our own creative act. So living off the grid and spending out time outside, being a naturalist, those are all like really important to my life. But I also really like cooking. So that's just something that I do like every day pretty much because a lot of the winter like
Mhm.
there's nowhere to eat out in McCarthy. So I have to cook and be creative with
Uh-huh.
like what ingredients we have on hand, which can be frustrating, but also I think it's just fun. Like as creative people, whether we're like cooking dinner or making visual
Mhm.
art, like we're always trying to function within constraints. So a lot of times my pantry is my constraint. And
Uh-huh.
being creative with spices and kind of like what ingredients I have. And then also foraging and finding ingredients from like that are just like growing wild around me because so many, especially like weeds or plants that grow easily, are really great food. I do sometimes have a garden, but I'm kind of not that great at gardening, so I really prefer foraging when I can, just because that's like what's already there.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
that's pretty fun.
And, and gardening in Alaska is a little bit different. I know our friend Mark Vale sometimes has problems with moose eating some of his vegetables and things in his gardens, and so people down here worry about rabbits. Like, but a
I
moose is
think
a little
we'll
bit.
have a rabbit problem this summer because we were like the snowshoe hare cycle goes in waves and it's on the upturn right now. So
Oh,
yeah, we have those problems too. But yeah, also moose. I know Mark has been working a lot on his fence technology to have more success, but it seems like almost every summer he spends like a lot of time growing these plants and then a moose will come at a key time and like eat all his broccoli and stuff. It's really
yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
tough. And it's a
Um,
short growing season here.
Yeah, so talking about you're a teacher and uh are there teachers that you want to give a shout out to, people that have inspired you and have taught you some things along the way?
Yeah, for sure. I actually dedicated my book to my to teachers because I think like as a teacher and just I never would have been able to write this book if I hadn't like had all of the amazing teachers that I did have. A few who were extra inspirational to me were my high school art teacher, Cindy Wasley, who kind of made art rigorous but also like really fun and a space for us each to be ourselves in. I used to take like naps in her office because she just had that kind of like safe space for whatever
Oh.
you needed as a stressed out high school student.
Mhm.
I really appreciate her. And like the fact that she made it rigorous too, so that it was something that you could like spend time on and get better at. And then from the science illustration program, Jenny Keller taught the field sketching class that really inspired me, and just having that as like a class that you could do in a graduate program, I was like, it really legitimized it and made it be kind of like look at it as again like a serious, rigorous practice that I was like, this is something I can teach adults and scientists and yeah, her framework of and like having that as a component to science illustration and working as a science illustrator, I think was really important to me.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I know, well, I'll ask you one more question about travel. I know a lot of people that live in Alaska have really interesting travel schedules. Are you traveling anywhere in the winter? Most of the time you guys travel in the winter, right? Because summer is like the time that you guys live for up there. Could you talk a little bit about some of your travel plans?
Yeah, I don't know what we'll do this winter. And I do like to spend most of the summer in Alaska because the summer here is like special and fleeting and just great to be outside here. Um, Last winter, my partner and I did a trip to Japan for a few weeks, which was really cool and just nice to go somewhere totally different. And we can talk more about that too. But we also spent a lot of time here, and sometimes spending the winter in Alaska is its own adventure. It was really cold this last winter. We had a lot of days that were minus 40 degrees, and it snowed a lot. And it was actually like the most intense winter that I've had in McCarthy or in Alaska yet. So that was kind of its own
Wow.
adventure, just staying at home. But getting to go to Japan for a few weeks, we went skiing. That's actually another thing that is like one of my hobbies or things that I like doing. That's not really related to art, but is a fun way to spend time in the mountains. And Japan has amazing powder snow
Cool.
and cool mountain culture. Like a really long history of people kind of like spending time in the mountains and all these really tiny ski resorts, ski mountains. They're not really resorts, they're kind of like ski hills that have like great food and aren't very expensive to get lift tickets to. So it was really fun checking out some of those places.
Cool. And so why don't you tell us a little bit more about skiing? How long have you been doing it, and like what what really excites you about it?
Yeah. I think it goes back to that like the process and spending time. Um, I've been doing it kind of my whole life. My like I said, my grandmother is Norwegian, so we grew up like cross country skiing. I don't remember learning to do it, but it was just like this is what you do in the winter. Put skis on your feet, go outside, and I think that definitely led to me like a, a love of winter because you like have something that you can do outside that's fun and easy. I know if you're learning to cross country ski, it doesn't feel easy. Um, and it can be challenging. And I still find it's like going down the hills is a fun challenge. But for me, it feels very accessible to put cross country. I've had like the same pair of cross country skis since I moved to Alaska, like, I don't know, at least 16 years ago. And just put those on my feet and go out the door and have a good time. So it can be like very simple like that. And the process of just being outside is always really relaxing and brings a new inspiration.
Mhm.
And then that like feeling of sliding through the landscape is nice.
Yeah.
um
And where
yeah.
you live, since I know that you live outside of McCarthy and you live on the Nizina River, and I remember getting uh, taking a flight, kind of looking at the river and stuff, and it's just so remote and wild back there. And I just think like putting on some skis and just going out there is kind of I would imagine that being just a great experience to have just about any day that you could do it, and how wondrous the world is from just right outside your front door.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about being here in the winter is that you can cross all the rivers that are like pretty hard to get across in the summer, so it really opens up the landscape. I know a lot of people will do like really long snow machine trips in the winter or snowmobile trips. And you can go, I mean, it's technically hard to do this, and takes like resources, but people will travel, yeah, places that are really expensive and hard to get to unless you have an airplane in the summer, because so much of this landscape is hard to get to without like crossing the rivers in the winter or getting up in the air. So
Mm.
that is
Yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah. Well, it's been really great talking to you, Kristen, and I hope that we get to see each other again in person sometime. Hopefully, that would be maybe in your neck of the woods, if we ever get back up to McCarthy,
Yeah.
that would be great. But you're always welcome down here if you guys want to come down to the Cincinnati area. But it's been really great chatting with you. Do you have any um, thing you want to say to anybody out there, friends, family?
Um, just thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I hope like, I don't know, I'm always inspired to draw just because I enjoy it, kind of like that whole spending time in the process. But hopefully, this inspires you maybe to get out and sketch, do your own sketching, but or just like spend time doing the things that you enjoy, and enjoy that. Like lean into the process because the things that we spend time practicing, we get better at.
Awesome. That's a great ender. Thank you so much.